Yes, it's hard to believe the Pixel 10a is a month old, but it's just the Pixel 9a again? Well, that is a fair assumption, but there's more to this phone than meets the eye. So let's get into it with this 1 month review of the Pixel 10a. If you want more Pixel content though, then you are in the perfect place. That's what we do here alongside all things Android, deep dives, reviews, news, and opinion all around the industry. It's all here. Come join the crew by stroking that subscribe button. Cheers. So over the years, I will admit that I've pined for the A series probably more so than the regular flagship Pixel lineup, and it's often because its lower price point has kind of brought about more interesting changes in a space that's littered with the devices that try and hit every single buzzword or trend in mobile technology. I've always been fascinated by the middle of the market, the kinds of devices that most people end up with using day to day, the kinds of technology that my parents end up choosing. Price there is almost always the determining factor in their purchase decision. So getting just enough is absolutely fine for them. They want a nice they want a nice screen, they want nice photos, but will complain rather than cast aside a phone or tablet and stick with it as long as possible. And after a month with the 10a, I kind of have built up some thoughts around this device. While I think there's nothing wrong with sticking with the design and making minor iterations, the Pixel 10a feels like it's making all of the right choices physically, and without forgiving Google while lamenting companies like Samsung for keeping the design identical, it has actually taken Google a long time to make reliable smartphones, so flipping the design script would inevitably and probably introduce issues there. And I think keeping things the same again and reducing the potential risks is a genuinely good decision from Google. The completely flat shape is something people will like, but that doesn't matter all that drastically because the mechanics of redesigning year over year is something that a mid-ranger doesn't really need to get entangled with. That's what I'm trying to say here. That's probably the most roundabout way of saying that the Pixel 10a looks good, just like its predecessor did. And coming from the Pixel 10 Pro, not being able though to snap onto a new Pixel Snap charger is kind of an annoyance for me. Get a case for that so that you can get access to faster 10-watt wireless charging. This is one of the few design choices that has been a genuinely major roadblock to me, but likely won't be a problem if you have zero magnetic accessories or chargers. But Google they've iterated on what is a perfect design for an affordable phone. There are a few problems, as I noted, that do feel hard to shake when other Pixels are getting better and better with every release and other phones out there. Take, for example, the iPhone 17, though. That has kind of shown that you can get a good, cheaper product and slowly add things to enhance it and lift the market, most notably when it comes to MagSafe, which is something that channel sponsor Spigen has once again stepped in to take care of this year on the Pixel 10a. So if you're considering this phone, I'd skip the official case lineup and try out a Spigen case for the Pixel 10a. Firstly, they're much cheaper without sacrificing features. Second, you get access to a boatload of other excellent magnetic accessories from Spigen and their MagFit system, which lets you connect stands, chargers, and even third-party power banks if you need a little extra juice day to day. I personally love the Tough Armor case because it gives me that total peace of mind protection while adding a little bit of functionality with that kickstand and a flash of colour to boot, which is everything I love about Spigen cases. If you want something grippy but colourful, I'm also a huge fan of the Nanopop case too, particularly for the 10a's plainer colour models. And if you want to keep things simple, try out the classic Ultra Hybrid. Those were a few of my favourites, but check out Spigen's entire lineup for the Pixel 10a and all of the Pixels down in the comment section below. Cutting back to the chase though, I think this is a great sized device that's really easy to use and hold. There's nothing clever or special about the design in that regard, but throwing a very good 120Hz screen, I think it's a recipe for a great experience, especially for those who've come from older devices with 60Hz displays and maybe lower. What's quite impressive though is that a phone of this price does include adaptive tone. And this is one of those colour tuning options that kind of seems insignificant, but having an already solid display that adjusts automatically to your surroundings definitely elevates experience quite drastically, and it turns what is a good OLED into a great one. I kind of hope that Google can start to hack at the bezels next time around, but yeah, it's a lot larger than phones of today with these bezels, but it's not that much of a distraction. I will say that I do think the haptics could do with some tweaking. To me, the vibrations are starting to feel a little bit buzzy rather than crisp on the higher tiers of Pixel phones. I think that's a nitpick in what is an otherwise solid framework for a phone at this price point, but I have been noticing it while using the 10a over the past 3 to 4 weeks. I do think the speakers, while they're not terrible, they aren't exactly great either. They could do with a little bit more tuning here and there, but these are the intimate details where I think obvious cost savings are apparent after a few weeks using this phone. So if you really do care about these extras, you're going to have to look for a more premium experience, probably at the Pixel 10 and above. So like you, I was initially annoyed that we would get last year's internals in what amounts to 99% of last year's design. In reality though, I've kind of come to terms with what this signifies, but that part of my brain that can't switch off kind of means that I can't think but help or be a little bit disheartened for prospective buyers. Yes, this is a phone that probably isn't designed for me and you, those of you plugged into all things technology, but I think parents, young people, elderly folk, it's kind of the everyman Android or the start point for that. This device is definitely somewhat affordable, or at least given away with a sell plan to get people into Google's ever-expanding product portfolio. So there are certain decisions that make a lot of sense. So despite my initial chagrin at the lack of that under-the-hood prowess, honestly, I do think the performance is more than adequate, which is both a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. All of my favourite applications will run just as well on the best Galaxy phone available today, maybe save games, but I'm not much of a mobile gamer. It is basically doing the most possible with those moderate internals, and even the most out-of-touch tech nerd probably would never be left frustrated with this phone, myself included there. Most of the time you just forget what this phone can't do because of what it does so effortlessly. And no, this isn't an impressively performant device, let's not get it twisted. It is, however, very smooth, fairly fast, and most importantly, reliable. Something that I don't think can be said of many other affordably focused Android phones out there. See many of those really low-end Galaxy A series devices from Samsung litter in the market that kind of don't get updates and they've had the same chipset for a long time. Again, without giving Google a pass for this choice, if using last year's chip and the similar internals on there is a way to keep costs down moving forward, I think this could be a way to position future A series phones. It's great getting the latest chip, but given the power discrepancy between Tensor and the best in the business, it isn't really that much of a jump in performance to kind of warrant a massive price uptick. So yeah, in a lot of ways, it kind of makes sense. A lot of the AI features have also been missed out because you miss out on that chipset, which I don't think is a negative either. At no point have I really felt that most would enhance my life while using the Pixel 10a. In many ways, I kind of feel like this is less stuffed in to try and upsell a Gemini subscription. Just enjoying Android 16 QPR3 for what it is, which I think is the best flavour of the OS out there. Performance-wise, it's not right up there, but experience-wise, it's really up there with the best in the business. Something that's always been really very impressive, even with last year's chipset, is that, in my experience, the battery is arguably better than the Pixel 10 Pro XL, which has been quite shocking. It has been mostly used as a secondary device to me while roaming with a physical SIM inserted, which might explain why I've been able to get a longer lifespan, but I do think if you are glued to your phone screen for upwards of 10 hours a day, this might not be the phone for you, but it is reliable enough to be one of the longest lasting Pixels in Google's lineup. So yes, if you care about battery life, this might not be the best. I've been getting mostly 30% by the end of the day. I don't necessarily have to reach out for a charger, and that's with quite moderate to light use on most days. I will say that it's become cliche to laud the Pixel camera for its consistency, but that is the key selling point at this sort of price point. I've thought about the times I've used other people's phones or my own camera and how I've wasted opportunities to take that perfect photo because of various circumstances or limitations of the hardware I'm using. There's no great secret here. I think the Pixel 10a is one of the best point-and-shoot cameras on a mobile for photography. Yes, the quality gap is starting to widen compared to other phones out there, yet it's hard to really feel sad, annoyed, or disappointed with what you can do with this camera. Simply put, for 90% of the population, and probably 90% of photos taken, especially those with the 10a, this will be more than enough. You get clean, crisp, sharp, and almost always in-focus images. Google just continues to nail the fundamentals, and while I'd love a little bit more resolution, a little bit extra zoom clarity, I'm really content with what's on offer here. I'd even go a step further and say that I could happily use this over many supposed top-tier camera systems just for its ease of use alone. Over a few trips with the Pixel 10a as a secondary device, as I noted, it's been a valuable tourist companion. That's not what I expected. It's just nothing more, nothing less than what you need day to day. And while the video modes definitely leave a lot to be desired, I think this is also another competent area. You're not going to be putting these on YouTube and making YouTube videos with this, but the Pixel 10a does exceptionally well with what it has. It doesn't promise more than it can deliver, which is exactly what the 9a did last year so well, and every A-series Pixel before it. So yes, if you care about the camera, it's just a fundamentally good system that works day to day. To me, though, I have to say the most interesting area Google has really made the biggest inroads is where the Pixel 10a is fully aimed at, regardless of this. I think the portion of the market and the potential audience is massive, and it's currently dominated by Samsung across the globe. I think it's why the A series is so important to Google moving forward. And I'll always have a soft spot in my heart after the 3A launched to such, I guess, positive reviews. It was launched at a time whenever the OEM was intent on giving a knockoff flagship experience with major trade-offs that try to paper over cracks. I think Google leans into this with the A series, and it's one of the biggest strengths of the lineup period. I think a constrained Pixel phone, at least in my opinion, has also helped out that bring the best in Google, with the A series kind of following or allowing for something special. Arguably, Google has done its best work by playing to its software strengths, and while it's not really offering anything that hasn't already been done a year ago, the Pixel 10a is genuinely a solid product. It's all but the same as last year, which looks bad, but I do think the optics of skipping a generation would probably have been worse than putting out what kind of amounts to the same device again with a few tiny tweaks. Yes, the 9A is probably a better buy because it's more discounted, but that doesn't stop the 10A from being a good option for lots of people out there. It just might mean that it's not you or me that it's aimed squarely at. Let me know what you think about the Pixel 10a. Have you managed to pick one of these up for yourself, maybe a relative or someone like that? Let me know how they're getting on down in the comment sections below. It's always interesting because this isn't the kind of phone that a lot of people will look at. They'll overlook it. It is what it is. Thanks for watching though, and I'll speak to you later.